I thought moving into my son's house after his wife had the baby would be the beginning of something beautiful. I'd lost my husband Frank to a stroke 14 months earlier, and the grief had hollowed me out in ways I hadn't expected. The house we'd shared for 31 years in Dayton, Ohio felt like a museum. Every room preserved exactly as it had been, and every room reminding me of what wasn't there anymore. So when my son called me in early March and said, "Mom, Cassidy's struggling. The baby's colicky, she's not sleeping, I've got the Raleigh project eating me alive, we need help," I didn't hesitate. I packed 2 suitcases, arranged for my neighbor Paulette to collect my mail, and drove 6 hours south to Knoxville, Tennessee. Their house was a newer build in a quiet subdivision, the kind with identical mailboxes and HOA rules about holiday decorations. My daughter-in-law Cassidy had decorated it beautifully, though. She had good taste, I'd always given her that. Pale gray walls, white trim, linen curtains. A nursery painted the softest sage green for little Owen. Though they'd changed the baby's name to something else by the time he was born, something they said felt more right. They settled on Beckett, 8 weeks old when I arrived, with my son's forehead and Cassidy's mouth and a screen that could peel wallpaper. My son's name is Trevor. He's 34, works in commercial real estate development, always on his phone, always half present, even when he's standing right in front of you. I love him the way you love someone you've watched grow from a red-faced, screaming infant into a full-grown man with his own mortgage and opinions about craft beer. Completely, imperfectly, and sometimes with tremendous frustration. Cassidy was 29. She'd quit her marketing job at the end of her second trimester, planning to return after 6 months. She was smart, organized, the kind of person who color codes her grocery lists. In those first days, though, she's moved through the house like someone just barely keeping her head above water. Dark circles, unwashed hair, a smile that appeared on cue and disappeared the second it wasn't needed. I told myself that was normal. New motherhood is brutal. I'd been there. I told myself a lot of things in those first weeks. The arrangement was simple enough. I'd help with Beckett during the day so Cassidy could rest. I'd make dinner. I'd handle whatever needed handling. Trevor worked from their home office, though worked is a generous description for what he did. Mostly it looked like video calls and stress-eating chips at his standing desk. He'd emerge for meals, thank me for cooking, and disappear again. It was a good arrangement. I was useful, I was needed. On the hard days, when I missed Frank so much the ache was physical, I'd hold Beckett against my chest and breathe him in, that particular smell of babies that exists nowhere else in the world, and I'd think, this is enough, this is something. The first strange thing happened on a Wednesday night, 3 weeks into my stay. I'd put Beckett down around 9:30 after his feeding. He was fussy that night, fighting sleep, and it took longer than usual. By the time I got him settled, I was exhausted myself, and I went to my room, a comfortable guest room at the end of the hall, separated from the nursery by a linen closet and a small bathroom, and fell asleep almost immediately. I woke at 2:09 a.m. I know the time because I looked at my phone out of habit, the same way I'd been doing since Frank died, that half-conscious check that had replaced the feeling of reaching over and knowing he was there. I heard voices, not loud, not alarmed, low and deliberate, coming from the direction of the nursery. I lay there for a moment, parsing it. Trevor and Cassidy checking on the baby? That wasn't unusual. But there was something in the tone, something clipped and careful. I got up. The hall was dark. The nursery doors was pulled mostly closed, just a thin edge of lamplight underneath. I moved toward it slowly, my bare feet quiet on the hardwood. Already checked, it went through this afternoon. That was Cassidy's voice. How much, Trevor? 12,000. Same as last time. She never looks at the individual line items, just the totals. A pause. She trusts me. I stood absolutely still. And the other thing? Trevor asked. I'll take care of it Thursday. Same as before. She'll sleep through the whole thing. I backed up 2 steps, my heart going strange and fast in my chest. I stood there in the dark hallway and made myself breathe, made myself think. She'll sleep through the whole thing. Thursday. She never looks at the individual line items. I went back to my room. I did not sleep. The next morning was ordinary in every surface way. Cassidy made smoothies, Trevor microwaved oatmeal and complained about traffic on I-40. I sat at their kitchen island and drank my coffee and watched them the way you watch people when you've decided to learn something. Cassidy was warm to me. She always was. That's the thing that kept twisting in my chest. She was genuinely warm. She'd ask about my day, remember details I mentioned in passing, bring me tea in the evenings without being asked the tea. I thought about the tea. The previous Thursday, Cassidy had brought me a mug of chamomile around 8:30. I'd drunk it while we watched a home renovation show. By 9:15 I was drowsy in a way that felt heavier than normal tiredness, the kind that closes in from the edges. I'd gone to bed early and slept straight through until almost 8 the next morning. No waking, no checking the time. 8 hours unbroken, which hadn't happened once since Frank died. I'd thought, maybe I'm finally adjusting. Maybe grief is finally loosening its grip a little. I hadn't thought about the tea. Now I thought about the tea. Over the next few days, I started paying attention in a different way. On Thursday morning, while Cassidy was at a postpartum yoga class and Trevor was on a call, I went into their master bathroom under the pretense of getting an extra roll of toilet paper from the hallway cabinet. The cabinet was next to their bathroom door, which was open. I didn't go in, but I could see clearly from the doorway. On the counter next to Cassidy's side of the sink, a bottle of melatonin, the extra strength kind, 10 milligrams, and beside it, a small glass dropper bottle with no label. I took a photo. I don't know exactly why. Instinct, maybe. Frank always said I had good instincts and the sense to use them. That afternoon, while Beckett napped and the house was quiet, I opened the banking app on my phone. My account. The joint savings account Frank and I had kept for 31 years, now mine alone. Almost $340,000 from his life insurance, his pension, 3 decades of careful saving. My financial advisor, a woman named Deirdre, who'd known Frank since the 90s, handled most of it. But I had online access. I scrolled back through 3 months of statements. The transfers were small enough to look like nothing at first. $2,000 here, $1,500 there. One for $8,000 that was categorized as home improvement reimbursement with my own digital signature on the authorization. I didn't remember signing anything. I scrolled further. 12 entries over 11 weeks. Some with authorizations I didn't recognize signing. Some with dates that corresponded, with a chill I felt in my back teeth, to the Thursdays when I'd drunk Cassidy's tea and slept so hard I couldn't remember dreaming. The total was $61,000. I sat in the guest room with my phone in my lap for a long time. The afternoon light shifted. Beckett made small sounds through the monitor on the nightstand, the little grunts and sighs of a baby dreaming. I thought about Cassidy bringing me that tea. I thought about her voice in the nursery at 2 in the morning. She trusts me. I thought about Trevor, my son, the one I'd driven 6 hours to help. Then I thought about Frank. I thought about what he would say, that steady, measured voice he had when things were serious. Don't react. Think first. Then act. Okay, Frank. I'm thinking. That Thursday, when Cassidy offered me tea, I accepted it. I smiled and said it sounded lovely. I carried the mug to my room, tipped most of it into the small trash can lined with a plastic grocery bag, drank the last 2 inches so the level looked right, and put the mug on my nightstand. Then I lay down with my lamp off and waited. At 2:34 a.m., I heard movement. I was already awake, had been for an hour. I heard their bedroom door, then footsteps down the hall. My door opened slowly. I kept my breathing even, my body still, the way I used to pretend to sleep when Trevor was a teenager coming home past curfew and I was deciding whether or not to say something. "Mom?" Cassidy's voice, barely above a breath. I didn't respond. I felt her presence in the doorway for a few seconds, then she moved away. I heard her speaking quietly to Trevor in the hall. "She's out." The sound of my nightstand drawer opening. My hands, resting at my sides, clenched under the covers. I heard paper rustling, the soft scratch of a pen. I had thought about this part the most, about how to document it in a way that would hold. 2 days earlier, when both of them were out for a pediatric appointment, I had borrowed my neighbor Paulette's nephew. He works in IT and was in town visiting, and asked him to help me set up a small recording device. It was a digital audio recorder, the kind used for voice memos, the size of a thumb drive. I had pressed it into a gap behind the lamp on my nightstand where it sat at the edge of the drawer. It was recording. I felt Cassidy place something in my hand, a pen. She folded my fingers around it and moved my hand across paper. Once. Pause. Again. I kept my breathing even. After they left, I counted to 300. Then I turned on my lamp. On my nightstand, beside the recorder, was a single sheet of paper, a wire transfer authorization form with my financial institution's letterhead. 3 signatures in my handwriting, or close to it, for a total transfer of $40,000 to an external account. I took photos of both sides. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and let myself shake for a minute. Just 1 minute. Then I stopped. The next morning, I called Deirdre before anyone else was up. "I think someone's been accessing my accounts," I said. I kept my voice low and steady. "I need you to freeze everything immediately. Full freeze. No transfers, no withdrawals. Nothing without me presenting in person with a photo ID." There was a pause. "Norma, that's my name. Norma, are you safe right now?" "For the moment. I'll explain everything. But the freeze first." "Done," she said. "Give me 10 minutes. Then I called my attorney. His name is Paul Garrett, and he's been handling Frank's estate. He drove down from his office in Knoxville proper, and I met him in the driveway while Trevor was on a call and Cassidy was nursing Beckett. I walked him around the block and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is why I've kept him as my attorney for 16 years. "The audio recording is the critical piece," he said. "Tennessee is a one-party consent state. You were present. It's legal. Combined with the bank statements and the transfer document. Norma, this is strong. He helped me file an emergency fraud report with my bank's compliance department that afternoon. He made calls. He knew the right people, the way good attorneys do. I spent the next 4 days gathering. I moved through the house like nothing had changed. I made dinner. I held Beckett. I accepted every cup of tea Cassidy offered and disposed of it carefully. I used my phone to photograph every document I could find when they were out, including, in Trevor's filing cabinet, whose key I'd noticed on his key ring, while hanging it by the door one afternoon, 2 sets of documents with my signatures of signing authorizing Cassidy as a co-manager on one of my investment accounts. She had been working toward full access, not just what she could take quietly. All of it. I also found something else in that cabinet. A folder labeled, in Cassidy's neat handwriting, "Memory Concerns, Mom." Inside were printed articles about early-onset dementia symptoms, a list of doctors' names and handwritten notes about specific incidents, times I'd supposedly forgotten things, seemed confused, repeated myself, dates, details. It was meticulous. They were building a paper trail to have me declared incompetent. I stood in Trevor's office with that folder open in my hands and felt something shift in me. Past anger, past grief, into something cold and very, very clear. I thought about Frank spending 30 years carefully building something for us, for our son, for our future. I thought about writing a check at Christmas so Trevor could put a down payment on this house. I thought about driving 6 hours because my son said he needed me. I photographed every page of that folder. On the 5th day, a Tuesday, I made my move. I called Paul first. He came with a colleague and a notary. Then I called the Knox County non-emergency line and told them I needed to speak with someone about financial elder abuse and fraud. They took the report seriously. When I mentioned I had recordings, physical documents, and bank records showing a pattern over 11 weeks, the officer I spoke to said he'd like to come by that afternoon. I told him 2 o'clock. Trevor and Cassidy came home from a late lunch at 1:50. Trevor was holding a bag from a sandwich place they liked. Cassidy had her big diaper bag over one shoulder, his Beckett in his carrier on her chest, his small head tucked under her chin. They walked in and stopped. Paul was standing near the kitchen. 2 uniformed officers were near the window. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of me. "Mom." Trevor's voice came out strange, pressed flat. "What's going on? Why don't you sit down?" I said. Cassidy looked at the officers. Something happened in her face, a calculation, rapid and visible. Then she started to cry. "Whatever she told you, she's been confused. Ever since her husband died, she's been having memory issues. We've been trying to help her. We've been worried." "Mrs. Calloway, One of the officers said gently, "My married name, which I hadn't taken legally but had used socially for decades. We've reviewed the documents your mother-in-law provided. We'd like to ask you both some questions." "She signed those transfers herself," Cassidy said. Her voice was controlled now, the tears recalibrated. "She authorized everything. We have her signatures." "You have signatures," I said. "Obtained while I was sedated without my knowledge or consent. And I have a recording that documents exactly how those signatures were obtained." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Trevor sat down heavily in the chair across from me. He didn't say anything. He put his sandwich bag on the table and looked at his hands. "Trevor," I kept my voice even, "I need you to understand. I have 11 weeks of bank records. I have the audio from last Thursday night. I have photographs of documents in your filing cabinet, including a folder your wife kept detailing a plan to establish grounds for declaring me incompetent." I paused. "I also have photographs of the melatonin and the unlabeled dropper bottle in your bathroom, and I've sent samples of the chamomile tea, which I didn't drink, to a lab." That last part wasn't entirely true yet. I'd saved 2 samples in small glass jars in the back of my nightstand drawer, but it would be true within a week. Cassidy had stopped crying. She was looking at me the way you look at something you've badly miscalculated. "She's lying," she said, but the conviction was gone from it. "I'm 63 years old," I said. "I taught high school chemistry for 27 years. My husband was a forensic accountant. I was raised by a woman who survived things neither of you can imagine, and she taught me one thing above everything else. Pay attention." I paid attention. Trevor tried to speak. What came out wasn't quite words. The next several hours moved in pieces. The officers separated them for questioning. Paul managed the legal documentation. Cassidy asked for an attorney almost immediately, which told me she'd thought about this possibility. Trevor sat in the kitchen for a long time not speaking, and at one point he looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was a boy, a particular kind of devastated, and said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't. It started small." "She said it was just borrowing." "Don't," I said. "Not right now." He nodded. He looked back at his hands. Cassidy was arrested that evening on charges of financial exploitation of an elderly person, fraud, and obtaining property by deception. The sedation aspect added additional charges once the lab results came back, TOEICs confirming traces of melatonin and diphenhydramine in the tea samples. Trevor cooperated with investigators from the beginning and entered a plea agreement. He received 3 years probation, mandatory restitution, and community service. He lost his real estate license for 2 years pending review. The judge handling the criminal case was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and when she sentenced Cassidy to 4 years in a state correctional facility, she said, "You targeted a grieving widow who came into your home out of love for her family. You methodically drugged her, stole from her, and were preparing to strip her of her legal autonomy." This court considers the deliberate, calculated nature of this offense to be a significant aggravating factor. 4 years. She'll be eligible for parole in 2.5. I recovered $53 of the $61,000 through civil proceedings and restitution orders. The remaining $8,000 is still being worked through the courts. Deirdre restructured my accounts with additional security layers. Paul updated all my legal documents. Beckett, my grandson, is with me now. Temporarily, the paperwork says pending a full custody evaluation. In practice, he's been with me for 7 months. He sleeps in a portable crib in my room at first, and now in a proper crib in the 2nd bedroom of the apartment I'm renting in Knoxville while my house in Dayton is being sold. I didn't want to go back to Dayton. Too many ghosts in those walls, and not all of them the kind I wanted to keep. Trevor calls every few days. Our conversations are careful, like walking across ice neither of us is sure will hold. He's in a rental in North Knoxville. He's seeing a therapist. He's told me twice that he loves me. I believe him. I also believe that love and complicity can exist in the same person at the same time, and that forgiveness is a process I'm not ready to rush. There are people who ask me how I did it, how I stayed calm, how I lay in that bed and let Cassidy guide my hand across those papers without reacting. I tell them the truth. It wasn't calm exactly, it was purpose. I had something I needed to do, and I knew that falling apart before I did it would mean failing Beckett, failing myself, failing Frank's memory. So I waited, I planned. I acted when the time was right. I am 63 years old. I retired from teaching 4 years ago with a commendation from the district superintendent and a card signed by 200 former students. I rebuilt my kitchen after Frank died because I needed something to do with my hands. I learned to drive in a blizzard when I was 17 because my mother said the world wasn't going to stop for bad weather. I am not a woman who is easily managed. There are hard days. Days when Beckett is teething and inconsolable, and I sit on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning with him on my chest, wondering what exactly I thought I was doing. Days when I see a gray car like Cassidy's and feel sick for a second before I breathe through it. Days when the anger at Trevor surfaces and I have to sit with it instead of swallowing it. But then there are mornings like the one last week when I had Beckett in his bouncy seat on the kitchen floor while I made coffee and he looked up at me, really looked, the way babies do when they're starting to understand that specific faces mean specific things, and he smiled, not gas, an actual smile, the first real one I'd seen, gummy and enormous and aimed entirely at me. I thought, okay, there it is. That's what this is for. Frank would have loved this baby. He would have held him with both hands and made ridiculous faces and embarrassed both of us completely. I tell Beckett about his grandfather sometimes, narrate it like a story because babies love the sound of voices and I love saying Frank's name out loud. I tell him about the trips we took, the house in Dayton, the way Frank laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them. I don't know yet what role Trevor will have in Beckett's life long term. I don't know what I'll tell Beckett someday about his mother, about the choices she made, about the precise calculations she made when she looked at a grieving woman who just wanted to be useful and saw a resource to be managed. I know this. I will tell him the truth, maybe not all at once, not when he's small, but eventually. Because I think the most dangerous thing you can do for the people you love is protect them from reality until reality arrives anyway and finds them completely unprepared. My mother taught me that. Frank confirmed it over 31 years, and a Tuesday afternoon in a Knoxville kitchen with 2 police officers and a folder of evidence and every ounce of nerve I had proved it one more time. Beckett is napping now. The apartment is quiet. There's afternoon light coming through the window over the kitchen table, the good kind, the kind that makes everything look slightly kinder than it is. I'm drinking coffee. My own coffee, made the way I like it, in my own mug. Nobody put anything in it but grounds and water. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.